This meeting is being recorded.
All right. Well, welcome back as we continue our series on the architecture of reality. We are, I'm continuing to record from the library rather than my office while we fix the leak in my while we recover from the leak that we had to fix in my daughter's bedroom. My son is sleeping in my office. Uh, but we have been talking about the sun, the moon, and the stars and the kind of imaginative perception and the understanding of influence from the planetary bodies and uh, but now I want to talk about a concept that was derived from the interconnectedness of the universe under the reign of God, of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. You know, Jesus as the King, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, and how there was a interconnected and overlapping jurisdictions theory that develops out of that through the Middle Ages and into uh, really right down to the establishment of the American Constitution. You have this understanding that when you looked up into the heavens, that each of the planets had a particular jurisdiction. So the moon ruled over its sphere, and the Mercury and the Sun and Jupiter and Mars and Saturn each ruled over their particular sphere under God that God had established a jurisdiction for them to rule, and that their uh, what caused them to rule in harmony was that each of them stuck to their own sphere. And you see this all the way down to uh, uh, political thinkers like Abraham Kuyper, who talks about sphere sovereignty, how each of those that there's different spheres with different jurisdictions. Well, in modernism, the only sphere that is considered valid is the sphere of the individual. That sphere it can democratically assign spheres of authority to other people, but those other jurisdictions are all intended to work for the individual, and that's just the way we assume things are supposed to work. But it isn't the way that we've always conceived of authority. So, uh, in in the old world, the way jurisdiction was conceived of is that under the moon in on the earth there were different jurisdictions established directly by God. There are four of them. There's maybe a few others that are sub jurisdictions, but there are four basic main jurisdictions. There's the jurisdiction of the self. All right, I have rule of myself. I rightfully rule myself, and I can either rule myself well or rule myself poorly. There's the jurisdiction of the family. There's the jurisdiction of the civic realm, and then there's the jurisdiction of the church. And each of those is given a realm or a sphere of authority that is given by God, and the responsibility of the authorities in those realms are each supposed to rule for under God, to rule in such a way that they reflect God into their jurisdiction, and that will bless the people under their authority, and bless the sphere under their authority. So if you look at the civic realm, for example, if you uh, lived in 1200 in France, you're going to be living under monarchy, under a king. That king is his job is to reflect the justice of God, reflect the love of God, reflect the care of God over his kingdom. So, and that has to do with making sure that the people are have justice given to them, and then they have the freedom assigned to each of them, as well as but then also the land itself, right? So they were responsible to make sure the land was well taken care of, make sure that the land was under their dominion was being brought to its intended end. So that has to do with protecting the wildlife and the space that it has, protecting the rivers, protecting the things that you were responsible for, and uh, uh, protecting, because of environmentalism. When we say, protecting a space, we tend to think that means keep the people out of it, but in fact, the land was supposed to have a good relationship with the people, in the sense that people were the gardeners of the land, and the king was conceived of as the ultimate gardener. And some of this just comes from the natural, obvious revelation that a land that's well taken care of flourishes. Uh, but some of it actually is derived directly from Scripture. Right? So you've got Song of Solomon, where the king is conceived of as a great gardener. And the first thing that he gardens is his queen. And then by gardening his queen, he learns how to garden well the kingdom, right? So the garden king becomes a real, um, a real deeply embedded into the psyche of monarchs, and the people, that they expect their king to have gardens. They expect their king in our modern conception of parks, actually, even the word itself is derived from king's gardens, that he would make, that he would take care of, not personally, but he would hire gardeners and they would take care of him. And then a good king opened those parks to the public, opened those gardens to the public. Well, and now we just assume that it's the government's job to provide parks, but that's a distinctly Christian way of thinking, is that the king is a great gardener who provides parks for his people, provides gardens for his people, and um, and then he would be trustworthy, right? Well, but his authority was established by God, and his keeping covenant with God, or keeping faith with God, was what retained his authority from generation to generation. Um, so and then you had the ecclesiastical authority that was given jurisdiction over the souls of a people, and uh, their authority was considered to be an objective authority over a particular group of people. And this is something that's really hard for us to imagine, because we believe you choose your religion, right? You're maybe born into your citizenship of a country, of a nation, but you choose your religion. But that's a very distinctly modern, even late modern, conception of the of uh, religion, is something that is added on rather than something that's fundamental to our identity. You were born, uh, your nation was wrapped up in, or your church membership, or your religion was wrapped up with your identity, because it was something that you were born into it, in the sense that the the church had jurisdiction. Now, all through the Middle Ages, they understood that there were people that were, born into a Christian family, born into a Christian tribe, born into a Christian nation, and born under the jurisdiction of the church, but they didn't really actually follow Jesus, right? They didn't follow God. They weren't but those were bad Christians, and it was worse for you in the afterlife to be a bad Christian than to be a pagan that never knew about anything, right? So it wasn't that uh, being born a Christian meant you're automatically a follower of God, because they understood that you could have bad priests. They would, Dante, when he writes his Comedia, there's all sorts of people that were raised Christian that are that he discovers in hell, and they've been telling themselves all sorts of lies about who God was and what he was trying to do, and so they landed themselves in hell because they didn't have faith, they didn't trust God, they didn't follow him, all those things. So their conception of religion was that there really was an objective authority that the church was given over the souls of men. The family then was another jurisdiction, and it was over the economic life. The, our word economic means house law, right? So the economic aspects of life were all given to the family. So in the Old Testament, you have some places where the family and the civic are combined. You have this in tribes. A patriarch is a simultaneous family ruler and civic ruler, right? The patriarch is a civic uh, office because they are the civic authority, but it's a family derived civic authority rather than a monarch, an emperor, or any sort of republic understanding, where the family is a separate jurisdiction, not an it's they're overlapping jurisdictions because it's authority over the same person, but they are separate jurisdictions and that they don't function together. But a patriarch was a family ruler who was also the civic ruler. And so, for example, the parents have the duty and the responsibility and the authority to discipline their children as children. It's one of the ways that we claim our kids as our own, as we are the ones that get to discipline them in such a way that teaches them what the world is really like. Whereas the civic ruler has the civic ruler can give the death penalty for murderers. The civic ruler give um, give can force someone to pay back a debt, or if they stole, they can force them to pay back double. Those sorts of things. Well, the family doesn't have the ability or the right to add coercive power to their word, with the threat of death, right? That's a family's not allowed to do that, or parents aren't allowed to do that. In a patriarch is when those two things are combined. So, um, and then you have the jurisdiction of the self, where I have I have authority over my own tastes, for example. I have authority over my own body. It's my responsibility to um, to discipline my body and bring it in line with my jurisdiction and use my jurisdiction well. And in each of these, and so if you think about the word opinion, here's a good example of how jurisdictions work. Right? Opinion is the authoritative declaration of the the established authority of a jurisdiction over how that jurisdiction is going to be run. Right? So a court gives an opinion. A federal court gives a federal opinion, and that affects all of the states in America. Right? The Supreme Court opinion affects all the states, whereas the when an opinion is delivered by, for example, the state of Montana, the courts of the state of Montana, that has to do with just Montana. Um, so we have that kind of overlapping civic jurisdictions. Well, when I give an opinion about what my favorite way to cook steak is, I can't force my opinion onto somebody else's tongue, because I'm the one that has jurisdiction over my taste buds, and they have jurisdiction over theirs. So if I were to beat somebody up because they liked the wrong kind of ice cream, I'd be overstepping my jurisdiction. Uh, but we uh, uh, the modern world, where the breakdown happens, is we have all sorts of opinions that we treat like facts, as if they can have been outside of our jurisdiction from ourself, right? So my uh, my if I said, well, I think um, I think uh, stealing ought to be allowed, uh, if you in certain circumstances, or I don't think stealing should be punished. Instead, stealing should be, the person should be put in a retraining camp if they're caught stealing, because the problem is not that they stole. The problem is that they wanted to steal, and so we're going to re-educate them, and um, that would be I would be outside of my jurisdiction and trying to give that opinion. Right? That's not how opinions work, and opinions are jurisdictional claims. Uh, and if you're giving an opinion outside of your jurisdictional claim, then you have confused reality. And but this is why, when you start getting uh, federal federal agencies whose job is to manipulate the economy, they're outside of their jurisdiction. That's the federal agencies ought not to have economic jurisdiction. That is not inside the realm, the limitations that the government is supposed to be working under, right? So uh, we used to the the concept of a limited government versus an unlimited government. Um, the is should be dealing in these sorts of categories. Now, we tend to just think limited government means small. We want small government, but limited actually should mean something along the lines of staying within their jurisdiction. So we and all of this concept is derived from, excuse me, it's early in the morning, and sometimes recording before the sun comes up means recording before your voice has decided it's ready. Uh, all of this is derived from uh, the even the metaphors that we use of jurisdictions and spheres of authority. The language is holding on from an older conception of a fully integrated cosmos where everything is intended to fit together. Where so you can have four authorities over one uh, individual body and soul, uh, and when it's working well, it all fits together, and there is harmony, right? And that so we all of that is metaphor. That whole metaphor system is derived from the old astronomy, where the planets each have their sphere, and within that sphere they have a jurisdictional authority, and they stay in their sphere, and it creates the music of the spheres, which is the harmonious interaction of the different spheres. Uh, they're the way they interact is by each creating their own tone, and those tones harmonize. And that's the uh, we don't have we don't retain the concept. Where we think of each sphere of authority in rivalry with the other. There's a limited amount of power, and we're each trying to each sphere is trying to take power to itself from the others, and in our experience that does happen a lot, but that's not the intention. So the understanding of spheres of authority, jurisdictions, overlapping spheres of authority and jurisdictions, I think is something that, as Christians, we uh, we should be um, working towards and wanting and praying for. But the way that we do it is by using the jurisdiction that we have been given well, right? By parenting well, by be taking your jurisdiction as a husband, or in a family, taking that jurisdiction and using it in such a way that it blesses those in your family, by taking your jurisdiction as a wife and or as a mother, and using that jurisdiction, that authority that you've been given by God, using it well, in a way that blesses the person under your jurisdiction, right? If you're a wife and you take your jurisdiction over your husband's body well, uh, you believe that and use it well as in a way that blesses him. If you're a husband, you take your jurisdiction over your wife's body well, and you use it in a way that blesses her. As parents, you take your jurisdiction to raise up your children, to you discipline them well and joyfully, and take that jurisdiction to train them, uh, discipline them into reality, train them well, and how the world uh, really works, right? That they have wisdom because of your parenting. Wisdom is the ability to live well in the world that God made. Then uh, you are working towards uh, the reestablishment, or the restoration of the cosmos, right? That's You've been given a small piece of the cosmos, a jurisdiction over a small piece of the cosmos, beginning with yourself, and using that to restore the cosmos, so that it becomes, like as we pray in the Lord's Prayer, that your little piece of the cosmos comes to reflect on earth what life is like in heaven. So it's a freeing concept, hopefully,